What is going on, baseball fans? Welcome to our World Series preview here at Diamond Digest, another This Week in Baseball episode. I'm your host this week, Jordan Lazowski. A small but mighty crew going on tonight. Joseph Silva will be joining me. Joseph, how are you, sir?
Better than Phillies and Astros fans right now, I can tell you that.
A little less stress you got to worry about. For me too. I enjoy. This is going to be a weird statement. I enjoy not having to watch my team in the playoffs, even though I hate that my team isn't in the playoffs. It's a weird statement.
It is, but if you've watched your team in the playoffs, you kind of know. I was watching the championship series. My buddy's a Padres fan. I texted him right before the Bryce Harper home run in Game 5. How you doing, buddy? Then he hits the home run. And he's like, never talk to me again after that.
I can't imagine, especially like that, being a fan of, you think about throughout this postseason, like being a Padres fan in that moment, or being I think of another good moment, like being a Mariners fan in the Game 1 walk-off by Yordan Alvarez when they played each other in the division series. I can't imagine being a fan of teams in that moment. As a White Sox fan, we haven't had a lot of moments, but when we do, they're either good or last year Houston just kicked the crap out of us. There were no gut-wrenching moments. We had Game 4 they blew us out in the first 6 innings. So I had 4 innings to really just contemplate my anger and frustration. I was kind of done with it. But I don't know, it's weird. I'm enjoying the playoffs, but it's fine that I don't have to watch my team, but I'm still very upset my team isn't in here.
Yeah, that Cronenworth single was heartbreaking to watch. Fun for everybody else, horrible for me.
And especially like that, it's you can see it falling apart, and then it happens, especially in the Dodgers series. I think it'd be worse if you're seeing it coming. It's this is going to happen, isn't it? This is really how it's going to go down. But that's not what we're here to talk about anyway. We can drown our sorrows all day, but you don't want to hear that. You want to hear about the World Series preview. Before we get to that point, however, we do have a few things we want to talk about managerial-wise. So as you know, most teams won't usually talk too much during the each individual series, the LCS, LDS, all of those. They won't talk about those too much, or managerial stuff while those are going on. But in between the series, we get a little bit more information. And between the end of the the championship series and the beginning of the World Series, we actually had plenty of time to get 2 of the 4 openings solidified. So the Rangers, the Marlins, the White Sox, and the Royals all started this offseason with managerial openings. 2 of those teams finalized their future managers. Bruce Bochy will be coming out of retirement. He will be heading to Texas to lead the up-and-coming Rangers. And over in Miami, first-time manager Skip Schumacher. And under-the-radar type candidate, I think someone that a lot of people might have said may get some interviews, may get a job somewhere down the line. He's getting a job now, beating out Matt Quatraro and Joe Espada for that job out in Miami. So 2 hirings done, 2 still to go. Joseph, I want to get your thoughts. 2 very different hirings for 2 very different teams.
Yeah, for Texas, Bruce Bochy is very much that established guy. As much as those Giants pains were a pain in my ass for those early 2010s, you can see the culture that Bruce Bochy had built for those Giants teams and how he did a lot and really inspired his guys to play great baseball. And you have a lot of pieces in Texas. You have a lot of prospects from the trades he made towards the latter end of the 2010s. You have Corey Seager, you have John Gray, you have Jonah Heim, Marcus Semien. There are a lot of great pieces there. If you get the right man and it congeals well, they can be a last wild card. So it's a really, really smart hire. And for Bruce Bochy, it's one of those, you turn around this Texas team, the legend grows. Because you took a team that's just been mediocre for a while, you come in, turn them around, boom. It's just another feather in your cap.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation to kind of fall into. You're kind of describing perfectly. It's one of those teams where Chris Young, who's the general manager out in Texas, is close with Bruce Bochy. So it was something where you probably assumed it may be a thing that happened throughout this offseason. But also it makes a lot of sense. Like you said, it's a guy who has the experience to help lead a team that has kind of just been stuck for a little bit. And you put enough talent together. I mean, there's already been rumors about what they could potentially do this offseason, spending big once again. If you go and do that, you might want a more experienced hire to lead that team. And some teams want that, some don't. And it's kind of interesting to see the difference in philosophies for maybe where the team views itself and then who they view as the best man for the job. And in this case, it's Bochy, who has plenty of experience with World Series, plenty of experience with World Series rings, and will be a very interesting hire. And then on the other side of things, you have Skip Schumacher, who is brand new to this, and Miami's in an odd place still. They're still in that rebuilding place where you have some talent, not a lot. Your high-end talent is high end, like you're talking Jess Chisholm, Sandy Alcantara, but you don't have those complementary pieces, I guess is the right word, to fill out that team. So I guess, in your experience, what does Schumacher bring?
For me, like Schumacher kind of brings the Cardinals, do it the right way type thing, just the fundamentals. And you kind of watch the Marlins, and sometimes like the fundamentals just don't get executed well enough. And you kind of see a guy who executes the fundamentals when he wasn't doing it before, turns him from an okay player to a good player to a great player. Like, he's the guy that can kind of hopefully unlock that hitting core, because we used to say if the Marlins got pitching, well, now they have pitching. If they have the hitting, it's going to be a big, big thing. They're going to be a scary team out east. So hopefully he's that guy and can bring in a staff behind him that's like, look, we can capitalize on Alcantara. We have a lot of good arms in this rotation. Let's build this hitting core around Chisholm and Soler if he bounces back. You have a great team.
You have to go out and spend a little bit more, and I think Kim Ng and her staff will probably understand that, and they kind of know what they're getting themselves into. It's an odd situation because, again, you're probably still a few years out. I guess maybe it's not an odd situation. It's an unideal situation. You're a few years out, but it allows your manager to grow with your team. You kind of see the dichotomy of where two teams view themselves. Maybe the first-time manager has some growing pains as a first-time manager. He gets a year or two to kind of grow into the role as the Marlins sort of grow into that role versus Bochy's there. He's been proven. He's ready to go. And he kind of gets the chance to lead that team in a team that views itself as either win now or win in the next year. Like, it's time to go now. It makes it interesting to see how the White Sox and Royals will handle their openings. I think what continues to be very interesting to me year in and year out, especially, I guess, maybe 2020 to 2022, Matt Quattraro and Joe Espada continue to get interviews. And they continue to be named finalists for these managerial openings. And the managerial cycle isn't done yet, so we don't know this for sure, but they continue to not get positions. It feels very weird, and I mean, you can speculate however you want, but I don't know, when you get that many interviews, I have to just wonder, and I don't think there's a great answer for it. I have to wonder why they're finalists consistently, but they're not getting that job.
It's just like, with the Chiefs, and you always hear like Eric Bieniemy's a head coaching candidate every offseason. And then you're like, why doesn't he get the job? And then you hear all the stuff that comes out later. I'm not saying any of that is what's happening with either of those two men, but it would not surprise me if there's like something we, the public, are not privy to, either about like their vision for the teams or just how they conduct themselves in clubhouses that really just detracts them when teams start looking more and more into it.
It's really interesting. And again, it's probably something we'll never really get much of an answer to, as the public's just really not privy to that information. But it's always worth considering, again, every offseason, these are the same names that fan bases want, that teams interview. and they always head back to the position they're currently operating in. Now, the rumor continues to be that, when Dusty Baker retires, it's Joe Espada's job. So maybe he's waiting for that, but how much longer do you want to wait? But also, if you're not getting offered the position, it's kind of like, well, I kind of have to wait for this. Matt Quatraro, we don't usually hear those rumors of Kevin Cash stepping down or something like that. I don't know. It's very weird that, again, hiring cycle's not over, that every time we go through this, you hear the same names, and at the end of the day, they're still sitting there without manager jobs. So it's something worth consistently looking at, and I think, there are still some dark horse names in the managerial searches remaining for the White Sox and Royals. I think in terms of transparency, haven't gotten much on either of them. Tends to lead me to believe they might be looking towards some manager or some coaches who are still in the playoffs. These are two good teams left with which to poach from. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it. I think I can speak from a White Sox fan perspective. The fan base is a little restless, not getting this answer. But that's sort of the pains of undertaking what is hopefully a very comprehensive search.
Yeah, because I'd rather, wait till like mid-November and get the right guy than get the wrong guy and push the window back even further.
Wow, I can never think of a team who would ever do something like that. Ever in my life. Rush a hire that, isn't part of an extensive process? Never. But anywho, we're not here to talk about that. We alluded to the two teams from whom future managers might be poached. Those are the Astros and the Phillies. That's our World Series preview heading into this week. And I'll be honest, 6 straight pennants for the Astros. That we probably could have seen coming. 7-0 in the playoffs. I look at the Astros. 7-0 might be the first team to ever go 11-0 in the playoffs. This doesn't even feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, of the 6 recent teams, the 6 recent postseason or pennant winners for this team, this doesn't even feel like one of their best teams, but it could be the best team when you put it all, and it's all said and done. You get a World Series championship, you go 11-0. It's a really good team, but it doesn't feel like the best version of the team that we've seen here, which is absolutely absurd.
I think on the high end, nothing is ever going to top that 2019 team with just Cole, Verlander, and Greinke on the top of that rotation. And even last year, you still had Greinke, you still had Correa, but the pieces behind them have stepped up so much. Like Jeremy Pena, I don't think anybody would have said this time last year would be an LCS MVP because, first of all, everyone thought Correa was still going to be in Houston. And second of all, not many people in the general public knew of Jeremy Pena and knew how special he was going to be, especially on a Houston team that's just loaded top to bottom everywhere. They're just a factory at this point. So the pieces behind them is what's really making this 11-0 team possible.
You look at it. So 4 of the last 6 teams, I think I just misspoke. 4 of the last 6 teams to win the AL pennant have been the Astros. That's just me stumbling over my words. 2017 Astros, the World Series team. 2019 Astros, 2021 Astros, 2022 Astros. You can look at those teams and name some of those guys, and it's again, you kind of hit it. It's it's not as top heavy as maybe previous with the 3-headed monster that the rotation is, but you're getting contributions from everybody, and you're feeling good about it too. And at the same time, it remains wild to me, and it's the state of the position over baseball. Catching, they haven't gotten a ton of offensive production from in a long time at the position, and it hasn't mattered. They're winning 106 games a year. It's an insane ball club, truly. And I know you're a Dodgers fan. I know you hate talking about them, and it's just an insane ball club. It's an insane franchise right now.
Yeah, because in 2017, rightfully so, George Springer did incredible things in 6 games, not the full 7, because he had a golden sombrero in game 1, and it was awesome because I was there. But if you look behind that, like as Altuve and Correa went, that 2017 team went. You know, they hit 500 in the 4 wins. They hit like a buck 17 in the 3 losses, or in the 2 losses that World Series. Whereas Altuve can go 0 for 23 to start the postseason, and you still
Mhm.
look convincing. You can go 17 scoreless in Seattle and still be in a position to win because your pitching is that good. You can come back down, what was it, 3-0, 4-0 in game 4 in New
Mhm.
York, and then still come back to win. They can beat you anyway. They are, quite frankly, and this hurts me to say to my core, they are what we thought the Dodgers were going to be after 2017. Just a team that plays together with a solid core and brings guys up year after year to help extend the window into eternity.
Right. And I think when you look at what is it, like the blueprint, I guess is the right word. The blueprint for what a rebuild should be. It's this. It's you eventually get to the point where you're so good that you can just let Carlos Correa walk. Fine, we have Jeremy Pena, and he's going to contribute, and he's going to be an LCS MVP in his first season. Like, come on. That's just the sort of stuff where it's like you don't get that from every team. And it's hats off to the franchise that they are, that they've been able to do this 4 out of the last 6 years. We'll get to our predictions in a little bit, but I see this being a Houston. I see this being Houston's series, but we'll get to that. I want to start first with some, not on the Philly side just yet. I want to talk a little bit about, let's just say the Astros do lose this series. What are some of the weaknesses, perhaps, that we can point to and say, yes, this is why they weren't successful, despite all these great things we just said about them, despite the 106 wins? Let's just paint the picture they lose. What are the weaknesses that probably led them to get there?
The weaknesses are probably going to be because we know it's Justin Verlander in game 1, and we can talk a lot about what Justin Verlander has done in the World Series, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But after that, you really don't know who is pitching when and where. You know what I mean? The Phillies have a very solidified 4. It is Aaron Nola in game 1, Zach Wheeler in game 2, Ranger Suarez, Noah Syndergaard. That's the 4 they're rolling with. We still don't know who is starting game 2 for Houston. They have a plethora of options, but they don't really have that solid number 2. And that's where you're going to kind of have problems because you need to be in that mentality, especially going into the World Series, and especially with the Phillies lineup that is as hot as it is and capable of capitalizing on any little mistake you make. Like, you need to be prepared. And if your game 2 starter is still not in that mindset, you're going to be in trouble.
And it's an important mindset too. Like either way you look at it, let's just say you're up 1-0. Well, now you got to be the shutdown to send it to 2-0 and make yourselves feel real good about heading on the road for the next 3 games, and you don't want to lose all 3 in Philly. And on the flip side, if you're down 1-0 at home, well, now you really got to be the stopper, whoever that number 2 is. It's a total, like you're saying, a total mentality thing that you have to get yourself ready for. And if you're not at that point, maybe they know more than we do, but if you're not at that point, let's just assume they're not, you're not putting yourself in a great position.
Yeah. And
And I
then
think,
but then offensively too, I would say like everybody after Kyle Tucker is kind of a question mark in that lineup. Like 1 through 5, that lineup is perfect for the most part. 6 through 9 is where you make your bread and butter, like the Padres did and how they got so deep. I don't really trust anyone 6 through 9 in that lineup.
That's a big thing too. It always happens in the playoffs. Your top 5, top 6 are probably going to do the most damage, but the games are won when those 6, 7, 8, 9 hitters still have to hit 3 times a game. And again, let's just say Jose Altuve continues to struggle, and you don't get that production from the bottom of the lineup. Now you're putting yourself in a position where you're playing up against a team that's going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. all the time. And they're playing fine enough defense, pretty solid defense, to where you're struggling to find breaks to make for yourself. I do think when you look at it, it's a deep team. It's a team that you can understand completely how they could win this series pretty easily. But also, it's a lot of layoff, a lot of lack of adversity. That maybe once you hit that first patch of adversity, now you got to deal with things differently. So it'll be curious to see how they handle it. I still view them as the heavy favorite, but we'll see. On the flip side of things, we have the team that, I'll be honest, I've been discounting since the beginning. I'm sure Phillies fans would rather me continue to discount it instead of changing the tides. The Phillies, who I said in the first series against the Cardinals had no shot at getting out of this, and then said there was no way they were getting past the Braves, and then said Padres were going to win in 6. I just haven't been right at all about the Phillies. And since I don't know what I'm talking about the Phillies, clearly, I'm going to ask you, why have I been wrong every single time?
Because really, October, it's really, as much as we want to talk about the A-Rod small ball thing and bunting, no, it's who could hit the ball the furthest, who can clear the fence. And 75% of the time, you out-homer your opponent, you are winning the ball game, quite frankly. And they have been doing that in bunches. But what particularly terrified me and why I flipped that switch after the wild card series is I noticed in that 9th inning, they didn't hit home runs. They played small ball. They did small ball so well that they won that series. And it was 2 white-hot pitchers they were facing in Montgomery and Quintana, a white-hot closer in Helsley. They did it off the best. And now they're just continuing to do it off the best. Max Fried annihilated him, and he is probably going to finish top 5 in Cy Young voting. Spencer Strider is probably the NL Rookie of the Year. Blew him up in the 3rd inning. And then if the talk was no one touches this Padres big 3. And guess what?
Mm-hmm.
You touched the Padres big 3 in a big way. So Houston's pitching staff's good, but this Phillies team has done enough and has gotten hot at the right time to where it really does not matter because they'll just hit the one mistake you make out of the 100 great pitches you throw.
It's the boomer bust mentality, but also, like you said, I've been impressed with a first-time manager in Thompson who's been very smart about when he's picked to do some small ball things. You won't find me defending the bunt all that often. You'll find me wondering why a man with 699 career home runs or someone around that number is advocating so heavily for small ball. Like, dude, you almost hit 700, A-Rod. Your love of small ball goes against a lot of what you did. Regardless, it's sort of that team that you always say one team's going to catch fire. One team's going to get hot at the right time. One team's going to do things right. And when you look at the makeup of these playoff teams, it's like, all right, they got a couple good starters, a good closer, or a good answer at the back end. Maybe closer is the wrong word, but they also have red-hot offenses. If you get all those 3 to click at the right time, you're fine. And if you go through and you really analyze every single matchup that's happened so far, someone's always missing. If the loser's always missing one of those 3. And you're at a point where just at no point have the Phillies been missing one of those 3. Nola and Wheeler have been as advertised and then some all postseason. The offense and Bryce Harper have been insane. Like, we're talking about Bryce Harper living up to everything he was ever billed at from the age of 16 when he was first, or whatever, however old he was when he was launching home runs in Tropicana Field. Like, all throughout, you're just finding a team clicking at the right time, and it's really cool to see at the end of the day.
Yeah, because that wasn't even like a bad pitch from Suarez in Game 5 either.
Right.
Because Yordan Alvarez, Shohei Ohtani, those are the only 2 lefties I can think that could take that pitch the other way, like you're supposed to, and hit it over. And if you're in that company, you must be doing something right here, quite frankly.
Like, that was 99 on the black. Like, that was an impressive piece of hitting. It's like, again, you're just doing it at the right time. You figured out exactly what you need to do. You've rallied behind your manager. It's impressive. It truly is impressive. The Phillies getting here the way that, I mean, I can't be the only one in America who discounted having to go through the Cardinals and then the Braves and then the Padres. And really, none of these series have been like nail-bitingly close for them. Like, they have taken care of business every step of the way, and it's really been impressive. I can't say enough about just, again, how wrong I've been down the stretch on that.
Yeah, so we talk about Houston 7-0. Philadelphia's 9-2 is just as impressive.
Yeah, I don't think you look at that and should discount it in any way. It's like, oh, 2 extra losses, but like, you had an extra series to go through. You're not considered one of the best teams. You snuck in. You know, it's the fun of the playoffs, and I know that's been one of the huge talks of how, this is exactly what MLB wanted. Like, someone sneaks in and they make it all the way to the World Series, and it's not the best product. It's like, it's fun though. Like, this is legitimately a good, like, fun NL side of this bracket. Like, I don't have the same qualms as maybe others do about the playoff format or the number of teams. I think you're always going to have surprises like this, but usually the surprises would be like Philly beating the Cardinals and then maybe taking Atlanta to 7 games and still losing. Like, that's usually where we feel the surprise kind of end itself. This time they made it to the World Series.
Yeah, because people forget, like, the Cardinals won 83 games in the one wild card era and won a World Series. So this has always happened. It's just recency bias because it's happened 2 years in a row in the National League.
And it's happening a lot in the National League right now, between the Padres going down, the Braves going down, Los Angeles going down, New York going down. It's like, within there's a couple 100-win teams, and like a team that was able to take down the Dodgers got taken down by the Phillies. Like, that's a lot to kind of process as you're looking at the past 2 years of the postseason and saying, like, what's wrong? Why is this happening? It's like, I don't know. I still view that as the beauty of baseball. Maybe people disagree. Maybe they just want to see the 2 best records go at each other each year. I really don't.
Because that 2017 World Series spoiled us. That was one of the best World Series of this millennium, and it was the 2 best teams going head to head. That's what's coloring everyone's biases here, if we're being honest.
Right. And it's like, well, let's just look at it from the best teams perspective again. Like, we probably would have seen Houston, LA this year, reasonably. You probably would have seen Houston, LA sometime between 2017 and 2022. Like, and you look at other sports too, part of the reason, baseball playoffs are great is because, like, you can't really sit down and say maybe you predicted the Astros. I'm sure a lot of people predicted the Astros. You can't really say there were too many people outside of Philly who are like, oh yeah, Philly's the team. This is how they're going to do it. Most of the time it was, well, they only have really Wheeler and Nola. That's not going to be enough, yada, yada, especially in the playoffs. You can't really expect your offense to show up against stud pitching consistently. This team is impressive, and it's very cool to see that despite the expanded playoffs allowing them to get in, they've made the most of their opportunity.
Yeah, this is the moment Bryce Harper has spent his entire life heading for, and I don't think he's going to waste his chance when he gets here.
I think it's cool. I think it's very cool to see Harper just truly, again, taking the stage, living up to everything he's been or was billed to be. It's impressive. It really is. It's hard to find other words than saying this team is really impressive. But at the same time, let's look at it from the other perspective. If they win, their offenses continue to do their thing. Wheeler and Nola are going to continue to do their thing. I'm going to ask you the same question. Let's just say the Phillies lose the series. what are some of those weaknesses that you point to and say, yep, this is probably why they lost this series?
It's everyone else behind Wheeler and Nola, quite frankly. Like, do we really expect Sir Anthony Dominguez to play like this? Do we expect Ranger Suarez to keep up this torrid pace? Kyle Gibson has been so bad. He has not started a single game this postseason. Is Noah Syndergaard going to show up again? Who's going to handle high leverage situations in that bullpen? David Robertson, maybe. I don't think I can name you another reliever in that bullpen if I'm being honest here. So it's really going to be like the pitching just implodes after games 1 and 2. And you're playing catch up because both of those men are probably going to be unavailable if you are lucky enough to get this series to a game 7. And what are you going to do from there?
Mm-hmm.
Put the entire hopes of your franchise and your season on the arm of Noah Syndergaard, who has, unlike Harper, not lived up to expectations that were set for him? Or do you trust Ranger Suarez to keep up this miracle streak that he's been on?
And I will say that's kind of how I felt for a while. I have felt that at every series I've picked against them that there was just no way the pitching was going to hold up. There was no way the offense could just continue to do this. There's no way they continue to, like, I think back to the Braves series. They pulled Ranger Suarez in like the 3rd or 4th inning in his first game. I'm like, you don't have the bullpen to do that. You're not the Astros. You're not, to some extent, the Yankees. You're not a team. You're not the Dodgers. You're not a team that can pull your starter in the 3rd or 4th inning and just bullpen it. Like, and then they did it. So I'm kind of along the same lines that eventually that all falls apart, I think. And kind of like you're saying, if they don't end up winning this series, it's probably because it just wasn't enough against a team like the Astros, who are just going to find and exploit every single one of your weaknesses. And you can't afford to make a mistake. And I think we saw that at the end of the Yankees series for the Astros. Yeah, like you said, they were down, 3-0, 4-0 in that final game. There was one error, and it opened the floodgates. And that's how quickly things can change when you're playing Houston. Like, you cannot afford those mistakes. But at the same time, the Phillies haven't really made a ton of mistakes either. Like, they've been really solid all postseason. It's a testament to how they got here.
Yeah, and then especially because they have to go into Houston and how weird that outfield's built. Like, you kind of need Brandon Marsh all 2 games at least that you're going to have in that ballpark to roam center field because of just the weird angles the Crawford boxes create in left. I don't trust, like, whoever they have in left, Castellanos, Schwarber, whoever ends up playing left field. I don't trust either of them to go get balls that carry them off the wall or just take a weird bounce. They'll turn doubles into triples if they're not careful.
That's a good point too. I mean, to the Astros' credit, they have put Yordan Alvarez out there in left field pretty much all postseason and been fine. And I've just, for me, I've been like, when is this going to, when is that really going to rear its ugly head? And it really hasn't yet. To their credit, they've just been able to blow past their competition. Defense will absolutely become a final factor. I think Brandon Marsh has a lot on his plate when they move to Houston, or excuse me, when they start in Houston, and potentially end in Houston. So we'll see. It's an odd series. It really is. It's 2 very different ball clubs in terms of how they're built. And I think if you're the Phillies, you have that sort of attitude like, now, why not us at this point? Why can't we do this? And I think that's a very powerful thing to have as a team. And it's the ability to fight and claw through 3 series already. And it's like, what's one more at this point? Like, let's go do it. That said, in terms of predictions for me, Astros in 5 is what I'm going with. I think this team is just too good. I think they faced bigger competition already, and I think they've handled it pretty well.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Philadelphia in 7, partially because I would like the narratives to continue that Houston cannot win a World Series unless they are actively cheating at Minute Maid Ballpark. But I'm gonna go a step further here. I think Houston's gonna lose this series because former Phillies gas can reliever Hector Neris gives up a back-breaking home run
Ooh.
in the 7th to Bryce Harper in Game 7.
Secret double agent Hector Neris takes down Houston with him in order to give Philly what they deserve. I do think if they're going to win, it's either going to go one of two ways. They're going to have to somehow do it quickly before the lack of pitching rears its ugly head. Or to your point, they're going to have to drag it out and scratch and claw and win a couple games and get Wheeler and Nola to start 4 wins, essentially, somehow, some way. I don't know how they would plan to do that, but I really do see it. It's either, if they're going to win it, they got to win it quickly, or they've got to scratch and claw. I really don't think it benefits them the longer it goes, but also at the same time, I really only see that as the only way for them to be able to win it.
Yeah,
because I don't see them coming out and just dominating this series right away.
They're not going to dominate it, but we've just said like they can't hit, off the Cardinals pitching. They did it against the Cardinals' 3 best pitchers. They can't beat this Braves pitching. They did it against the Braves' 2 best pitchers. There's no way they can beat the Big 3 in San Diego. They only lost 1 game to the Big 3, and that's because Aaron Nola imploded in the 5th inning of Game 2. It had nothing to do with their offense. So we keep doubting them against all these great pitching staffs, Cy Young contenders, hot closers, all-star closers, pitchers infected with Cardinal Devil magic. They have been impervious to it all. So
it really is. It's going to be a story that, looking back, no matter what way this series goes, did you really have to take a look at, they went into this season. I remember saying this early on, and I've said it on a previous podcast. Like, they're going to prove whether or not you can literally hit your way to the World Series this year. And they did it, to their credit. They hit their way to the World Series. Like, it's going to be a case study for some teams of, like, how do we build this team? How do we build our team moving forward, knowing what they were able to do? Is it just, this isn't the way to go, this isn't the way to replicate it? It'll be a cool case study for them. I would like to see them win. I would like to see sort of that underdog story finish itself off. But I think to spare the Phillies fans, at least they can't blame me since I picked the Astros.
So. I'm keeping the trend because I picked against Houston all this postseason. I picked Philly all this postseason. So one of the trends is going to hold.
So someone's going to be very happy that we stuck to our guns either way. I'm very curious to see, though, what ends up happening here, because I do think we're in for a good series either way. Even if it's a quick win one way or another, I think they should be good games. But I'm curious to see what a layoff does. I don't know if the layoff will affect Houston as much. They're kind of used to this. I'm wondering how the layoff affects Philly. I think a team that has had to play in the wild card and then had to play right away and then had to play right away again and has had, 4 or 5 days off at this point? I wonder what that does to their mojo now. I'm curious. I think I don't think in a course of 162 games, those things matter. I think they matter more now in the playoffs. So I'm curious to see how it goes for them. But Game 1 will be Aaron Nola. Thank you. I forgot that name. Aaron Nola versus Justin Verlander. Game 2, Zach Wheeler versus to be determined. Game 3, we don't know anything about, but like Joseph said, we can probably assume on Philly's side, it's going to go Nola, Wheeler, Suarez, Syndergaard, and then figure it out from there. It'll be interesting. I'm very curious to see how Houston sets the rotation. I'm very curious to see how Philly responds. And I think, like I said, I think we're in for a good series here. As we wrap up our World Series preview episode, and first of all, Joseph, thank you for joining me and previewing these hopefully many good games to come. I want to get your thoughts on, it hasn't been the ideal postseason for you as a Dodgers fan. Do you have so far a favorite postseason moment? And if so, what is it? And if not, what are you looking for in this series to give you that favorite postseason moment?
I could be cliche and say the Bryce Harper home run because everyone's going to say the Bryce Harper home
All right, so
home
I'm
run.
changing my answer now. I'm glad you went first.
But I'm going to skip it. It's a moment that will be replayed forever. I'll say the SpongeBob walk-off in
Oh, that
Cleveland in that 15-inning epic. Just because it is a surreal moment to watch grown men sing SpongeBob SquarePants as someone rounds the bases after hitting a walk-off home run. That's one of those things that really only happens in baseball. It's Baby Shark all over again.
I'm gonna pick a different SpongeBob walk-off for now, only because it was the one versus the Yankees. I think that was game 1 or I can't remember. One of the earlier games in the series. Maybe it was game 3. It was game 3. Yes, it was game 3. And I just remember, and it's a test, and the reason it's my favorite is because it kind of confirms in my head everything I've thought about Cleveland for the entirety of this season. I remember them not sending out Clay Holmes, the Yankees. And I remember sitting there thinking, there's no way this doesn't come back to haunt them, right? And then, sure enough, I'm watching this inning unfold. There's the quick drop or blue pit. I'm like, this is really happening, isn't it? Like, and it's just that's the type of team they've been all season, where just that little bit that they get, they take advantage of it consistently. And it's impressive. It really is. I've used impressive a lot. There should be a counter on this episode for me. It's impressive in a frustrating way as an AL Central fan to watch that, to remember watching that game, not seeing Clay Holmes come out, being like, there's no way they get away with this. And then sure enough, another SpongeBob walk-off. So that's my favorite moment, other than the cliche Harper homer, because I mean that's really cool for a franchise that hasn't seen much since 2008. And it's cool to see such a likable, fun, energetic team right now in the playoffs. So that's going to do it for us at this point. We have one more episode of This Week in Baseball. It will be after the World Series. We'll do a World Series recap, a little bit of an off-season preview, maybe get the final answers on the final 2 managerial hirings. Maybe there's a third if the Yankees decide to make some changes with Aaron Boone. I don't think that's going to happen, but that is still to be determined. That'll be our final episode of This Week in Baseball for season, I believe 3 this is. It's been a great ride. Again, want to thank everybody for their support. Diamond_digest is the Twitter handle. At Diamond Digest is TikTok. Diamond.digest is Instagram. Diamond-digest.com is the website. Make sure to follow everyone that you see come across our timeline. We try and retweet our writers. Joseph and I have our Twitter handles on here. Make sure you follow along with both of us and continue to stay on the lookout for great content to come. As always, appreciate the support, appreciate those who listen, those who watch these podcasts. It's always fun to put them together. And Joseph, appreciate you for continuing to come out throughout this postseason to make sure we have podcasts to put out for people. So, any final thoughts?
Go Phillies.
Can't say it any better than that. So, for Joseph Silva, this is Jordan Lazowski signing off. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your week. Enjoy the World Series. And we will be back for one final episode to conclude the 2022 season once the World Series is done. So take care. Thanks as always for your support, and we will talk to you soon.